SAS. The Special Air Service was founded in 1941 by Lieutenant David Stirling, who convinced the British Army to let a small team of men do what entire divisions could not. Their second mission alone told you everything about how they operated. 8 men raided 3 German airfields in Libya, destroyed 60 aircraft, and returned without losing a single soldier. The German High Command was so threatened by them that Hitler personally issued the Commando Order, which meant any captured SAS soldier would be executed on the spot rather than taken as a prisoner of war. That order was a backhanded compliment from the most dangerous military in the world. After the Second World War, the SAS was disbanded, rebuilt, deployed to Malaya, then Oman, then Northern Ireland, quietly becoming Britain's most capable counterterrorism force, while almost nobody outside the government knew they existed. That changed on the afternoon of May 5, 1980. 6 gunmen had seized the Iranian embassy in London 6 days earlier, taking 26 hostages and making demands the British government had zero intention of meeting. When one hostage was executed and his body thrown onto the street, the order went through. 30 SAS soldiers entered the building from multiple points simultaneously. 17 minutes later, 5 of the 6 gunmen were dead. 24 hostages walked out alive, and the entire operation had been broadcast live on British television. GSG-9. Germany built GSG-9 out of shame. During the 1972 Munich Olympics, Palestinian terrorists took 11 Israeli athletes hostage, and the German police response was so catastrophically mishandled that every hostage died, along with 1 police officer, on a runway at Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base. The German government understood immediately that what had failed was not courage, but capability, and within months authorized the creation of a dedicated federal police counterterrorism unit. GSG-9 was officially established on April 17, 1973, modeled partly on the British SAS and built under the command of Ulrich Wegener, the man who would personally lead its most famous operation 4 years later. In October 1977, 4 Palestinian terrorists hijacked Lufthansa Flight 181 out of Palma de Mallorca, flew it across 5 countries over the course of 5 days, executed the pilot in Yemen when he tried to secretly signal ground authorities, and eventually landed in Mogadishu, Somalia. GSG-9 followed the aircraft every step of the way. On the night of October 17th, Somali forces lit a diversionary fire on the tarmac ahead of the plane. The 2 hijackers in the cockpit moved forward to look. That was the 7 minutes GSG-9 needed. Operators stormed through 6 entry points simultaneously, killed 3 of 4 hijackers, and freed all 86 hostages without losing a single commando. The entire assault was over before the diversionary fire burned out. Spetsnaz. The word Spetsnaz translates simply as Special Purpose Forces, but the Soviet Union built something far more specific than that name suggests. Founded in 1949 under direct GRU military intelligence control, Spetsnaz units were designed from the beginning to operate inside NATO territory before a war even officially started. Their targets were nuclear weapon storage sites, communications infrastructure, and senior military commanders. The plan was to eliminate the West's ability to respond before Western governments had finished reading their morning briefings. At peak Cold War strength, Spetsnaz numbered in the tens of thousands, spread across units that reported to different ministries and operated under different chains of command, making them deliberately difficult for foreign intelligence services to map or track. Their combat record is extensive and brutal in equal measure. During the Soviet War in Afghanistan between 1979 and 1989, Spetsnaz units executed over 3,000 combat missions in terrain that destroyed conventional Soviet formations. In Chechnya in the 1990s, they conducted urban raids and targeted assassinations in conditions where Russian regular army units suffered catastrophic losses. In 2014, soldiers in unmarked green uniforms and no identifying insignia appeared across Crimea overnight, seized government buildings, and handed Russia control of the peninsula within days before anyone in the international community had formally agreed on what to call them. Western journalists named them the Little Green Men. Russian officials denied they existed. The airports were already taken. Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs trace their origins to the beaches of Normandy in 1944, where their predecessors, the Naval Combat Demolition Units, blew 8 gaps in German defenses on Omaha Beach under direct fire, taking a 52% casualty rate in a single day. President Kennedy formally created the SEALs in January 1962, drawing from those same underwater demolition teams and shaping them into something the U.S. military had never fielded before: sea, air, and land. A unit that could infiltrate from submarines, parachute from high altitude, or emerge from a river at night and be gone before anyone confirmed they were there. Their training is built to break people before the enemy ever gets the chance. Between 75 and 80% of candidates who attempt Berets do not finish it. Hell Week alone runs for 5.5 days with a total of approximately 4 hours of sleep, and that is not the end of the pipeline. The ones who survive reach SEAL Team 6, officially known as DevGRU, which is where the most sensitive missions land. On May 2nd, 2011, 23 SEALs flew 2 helicopters into Abbottabad, Pakistan, beneath radar coverage and in complete radio silence. One helicopter clipped the compound wall and crash-landed on entry. The SEALs destroyed it, continued the mission, and completed the entire operation in 38 minutes. Osama bin Laden, the most wanted man in the world for a decade, was dead before most of Washington had finished reading the briefing. Delta Force was created because the United States watched the rest of the world handle terrorism and realized it had no equivalent answer. Colonel Charles Beckwith spent a year attached to the British SAS in the 1960s, came back, and spent the next decade trying to convince the U.S. Army to build something similar. In November 1977, they finally listened. Delta's first real test came 3 years later during Operation Eagle Claw, the attempted rescue of 53 American hostages held in Tehran. The mission collapsed in the Iranian desert when helicopters malfunctioned and 8 servicemen died in a collision before a single shot was fired at the enemy. Beckwith stood in front of the cameras and took full responsibility. Delta went back to work. What followed was a unit that spent the next 4 decades operating in places the government would not confirm and taking on targets most militaries would not touch. In Mogadishu in 1993, when 2 Black Hawk helicopters were shot down during a raid gone wrong, Master Sergeant Gary Gordon and Sergeant First Class Randy Shugart voluntarily inserted into the crash site to protect a wounded pilot. They were surrounded, massively outnumbered, and they knew it. Both were killed holding that position. Both received the Medal of Honor. In 2003, Delta operators pulled Saddam Hussein out of an underground hole in the ground near Tikrit, handed him to authorities, and disappeared back into the shadows without a press conference. Delta Force officially does not exist. It keeps showing up anyway. Green Berets. The United States Army Special Forces were founded in 1952 by Colonel Aaron Bank, a veteran of the OSS who had parachuted into occupied France during the Second World War to organize resistance fighters. Bank believed the future of warfare was not more tanks or bigger divisions, but small teams of men who could disappear into hostile territory, learn the language, earn the trust of local populations, and turn them into fighting forces. The Army took some convincing. President Kennedy did not. In 1961, Kennedy personally authorized the Green Berets to wear their distinctive headgear, a symbol the military had previously banned, and publicly championed the unit as the future of American power projection. When Kennedy was assassinated 2 years later, a Green Beret was placed on his coffin as a final tribute. Their defining mission came on the night of October 19, 2001, 5 weeks after September 11th. 12 Green Berets from Operational Detachment Alpha 595 were inserted into northern Afghanistan with a mission that had no conventional military solution available. There were no roads passable by vehicles, no infrastructure, and no U.S. forces within reach. So they rode horses, 12 soldiers on horseback, coordinating airstrikes via laptop computers, working alongside a Northern Alliance militia they had met days earlier. Within weeks, that combination of medieval transport and satellite-guided bombs had driven the Taliban from power across the country. The U.S. military later commissioned a 16-foot bronze statue in New York City to commemorate the mission. It shows a Green Beret on horseback, The statute does not need an explanation. GIGN. France created the GIGN in 1973 with 15 operators, a budget that barely covered equipment, and a mission statement that most European governments were only beginning to understand they needed. Germany lost 11 Israeli athletes trying. France decided it would not repeat that lesson. GIGN trained relentlessly in marksmanship, hostage negotiation, and close-quarters combat, built its numbers slowly, and conducted over 1,000 missions across 2 decades that almost nobody outside the French government knew about. Then came Christmas Eve, 1994, and the world found out exactly what France had been building. 4 terrorists from the armed Islamic group seized Air France Flight 8969 in Algiers with 229 passengers and crew aboard. Over 3 days, they executed 3 passengers, demanded release of imprisoned militants, and requested far more fuel than Paris required, telling anyone paying attention they had no intention of landing in France at all. Forensic analysis later confirmed their actual plan was to detonate the aircraft over the Eiffel Tower. When the plane landed in Marseille, GIGN operators disguised as airport ground crew boarded under the pretense of cleaning the aircraft, used the access to map the interior, and identified the exact position of every hijacker. The assault that followed lasted under 20 minutes. All 4 terrorists were killed, 229 passengers and crew walked off the plane alive, and 9 GIGN operators took gunshot wounds without a single one leaving their position. Since its founding, GIGN has completed over 1,800 missions and rescued more than 600 hostages. They have never once lost a hostage during a direct assault. GROM was born from a specific humiliation. In 1990, as Poland was transitioning out of decades of communist rule, Polish intelligence officers helped the CIA extract personnel trapped in Iraq on the eve of Operation Desert Storm. It was a daring, successful operation that saved American lives, and it cost Poland nothing except the goodwill of every hostile government in the Middle East. Months later, 2 Polish diplomats were shot dead in Lebanon in direct retaliation. Lieutenant Colonel Sławomir Pedelicki flew to Beirut personally, secured the safe evacuation of Polish civilians and remaining staff, returned to Warsaw, and handed the government a proposal for a special operations unit that Poland clearly needed and clearly did not have. On July 13, 1990, GROM was established. The United States, grateful for what Polish intelligence had done in Iraq, reduced Poland's national debt by $20 billion and sent Delta Force and SAS instructors to train the first recruits. The name means thunder in Polish, and the unit's full official title carries a deliberate tribute to the Cichocimni, the silent unseen, the 316 Polish paratroopers trained in Britain during World War II, who dropped alone into Nazi-occupied Poland to fight from inside. GROM carries that lineage consciously. Every operator must speak at least 2 languages and qualify as a combat medic, earning the unit its nickname among Allied forces, the Surgeons. In Iraq in 2003, GROM worked directly alongside U.S. Navy SEALs to seize the Khair al-Amaya oil terminal in the Persian Gulf, one of the opening operations of the entire invasion. American commanders who operated with them in Iraq and Afghanistan consistently ranked GROM among the most effective special forces units they had ever worked with, which is a significant thing to say about a country that most people could not have found on a map when the unit was founded 35 years ago.